After the last night blizzard, the frontage of the yard was bearing resemblance to a huge snowbank. Andrew looked out the window, whistled, and began to get dressing. He grabbed a white plastic snow shovel in a hole and stepped to the porch. He got himself slightly stretched out. He was to clean not only the pavement that led to the gates, but also the area in front of the shed with trusty steed snowmobiles. After he had checked up the sole scope of work, the young gamekeeper pertly started to shovel. His wife was just about to come back from her parents, and it was impossible to drive in the front yard. He was almost done when someone beeped from the street. He hastily pulled the work jacket that he took off in the heat of his work in and hurried to open the gates. Lana dashed in the yard, jumped out the car, and hung on husband's neck. "I've missed you. You were a good boy, weren't you?" The man gently took her by the waist. Of course, except for flirting with the flock of crows that swarmed all over the old tree and chattered loudly, I had to scare them out. "I won't be jealous to them, I guess. Come on, let's unpack the gifts. It looks like we are going to be alone for the holidays. My parents are going to a boarding house." Andrew made a long face, but impatiently rubbed his hands inside. It's been a long time he was willing to celebrate New Year with his darling in a snowed country house. The man unloaded the car and ran inside to catch up his wife, who was making faces in the window. "Look what I got for you." Lana deftly yanked a beautiful bright blue sweater out of the crisp packaging. The man took the brand new piece of clothes and held it tight. Long woolen hair started to tickle his beard. "Come on, put it on," said the young woman and looked at her husband smiling. "Maybe later." Andrew looked at her confusedly. He didn't want to change at all. "Just say you don't like it," said she, and pouted. The man pulled off his pullover and began to wear the new one. He was already straightening his sleeves when the sound of shooting came from the street. Andrew was looking tensely at the window, trying to listen closely. The shooting of animals in the territory of Forest Reserve was strictly prohibited. After he had stayed still for a minute, he dashed to the corridor to get dressed and come back to a lightweight-looking safe to grab a rifle. He checked the bandolier and jumped out. The man saddled one of the snowmobiles, drove around the car, and raced it to the sounds of relentless shooting. He was driving along a snow-covered forest road to a deep ravine, where a small flock of wolves was hiding that afternoon. The flock was indeed very small. Lana and him were very happy of every new baby wolf. They controlled their number by their traces. The gamekeeper was generally anxious about forest animals because the forest had to be renewed almost from scratch. 7 years ago he, a biological faculty graduate, was sent to restore almost burned down forest reserve. After 4 years there was a young forest on the spot of fires. Even hoofed animals returned. But there were no wolves, and it affected the forest population health in a negative way. Cases of infections dangerous to humans have become more frequent. Then a buddy of him offered Andrew a couple of semi-domesticated wolves seized from poachers. This is how Sergo and Jella became his cohabitants. After they had grown up, they went to the forest with their offspring. And at that point some biped men were trying to kill the results of years of his efforts. Having made a twist, he sprayed everything in front of him with snow, and stopped at the edge of the ravine. The first thing he saw were red little flags that didn't let the wolves run, and a bunch of drunk unknown men who were having fun shooting rushing around grey predators. He shot across the bow and cupped his hands in the form of a bullhorn after he had assessed the situation. "Guns down! Draw up your documents." His voice thundered over the forest, amplified by the echo. The shooting stopped, But no one was in a hurry to drop weapons. The four scoundrels started to surround him from different sides. The man backed away, trying not to let the intruders out of sight, and then he received a crushing blow on the head with a rifle butt. The last thing that Andrew saw falling was the face of the fifth man, who came up from behind. "Pete, are you right out of your mind? It is one thing to shoot animals, and another to down the gamekeeper." Poachers stepped around the motionless body. "Well, such a great birthday, huh? We got to run before he's missed. Serge, is he alive? Check him up," said the bull with beard and smallpox scars, who touched victim's leg with his boot. "You need him checked? You do it," the red-haired guy spitted down and cursed. "Who cares if he is alive? He won't come to himself soon. It is for us to kill him, if not us. Come on, before someone has come by." Two villains, having thrown aside the forester's gun, grabbed the lifeless body by the arms and dragged to the edge of the ravine. They pushed him, and Andrew flew ahead over the hills down the steep slope. The whole crew hastily jumped in the car and blasted off with roaring. Lana, who stayed at home, was walking around anxiously, trying to catch every noise. Silence that had come after the morning shooting was making her nervous and worried. She was waiting for her husband to return, but there wasn't anything like the sound of an upcoming snowmobile. Sitting at the window, she was trying to shake off these evil thoughts. "He's probably done with poachers and on his way to check up the father's cordon." She was trying to reach him repeatedly and listened to the automatic response. "The person you are trying to reach is currently unavailable." And again, rubbing the window curtain, the woman suddenly saw a dark truck with city numbers rushing down the road. The car flew extremely fast, barely fitting the turns. Since their house was up the hill, she could clearly see the truck almost crashing into a sleigh with harnessed horse, and drove off as fast as a wet cat. Her heart sank in her boots. Lana sat down at the table and started to pat it with fingers. If he wasn't coming in 2 hours, she would call somebody for help. Andrew was slowly regaining his consciousness. A sticky substance smeared his face with warm strokes and wasn't letting open his eyes. "Bleeding," understood the man, and gripped some snow with his hand to put to an open wound. It was completely silent in the forest. The great sky hung very low over the edge of the ravine. "It's about to snow. I got to get out." The thought flashed in his head, and he closed his eyes powerlessly. Lying like that for another minute, he started slowly getting up. His head was killing him, and his right leg did not move. However, he called up all his strength and slowly crawled through the bottom of the ravine. Andrew slipped off the hardened slope and tore his fingers to blood. Finally, he came up in 10 meters from where he had fallen down. A snowstorm was about to get started. Snowbreakers swirling through the woods were quite a vivid sign of coming bad weather. The man fumbled the phone in his pocket and pulled out the device, which had fallen into several parts. He threw away an unnecessary gadget and looked around, trying to orient. Having thought for a minute, he broke off a long branch. Leaning on it, he slowly tracked to the hunting hut on the hillock, dragging his injured leg. He could barely make it up the frozen porch. He felt the key up the beam and almost fell inside. Trying to close the door, he felt dizzy, and leaning on the door he was slowly sliding down the wall. The man did not know how long he was in such a drowsy state. On the porch near the open door there was already a snowbank. It was growing dark. Unable to move, he thought absent-mindedly, "I won't make it through the night. I will freeze. Feel sorry for Lana. What is she gonna do without me?" Looking through the darkness with his opened eyes, He was saying goodbyes to everyone, and suddenly he felt that someone was nearby. Four grey figures silently slid to the porch. Green lights were gleaming ominously in dusk. He could feel the smell of wet wool, blood and gunpowder. Making his last effort, he opened his eyes and saw large eyes of a wild animal. He got scared and flinched. His gaze rested on a strip of grey wool growing in the opposite direction from the nose to the forehead, and the familiar scar above the left eyebrow. "Sergo?" slowly moved the gamekeeper. The wolf dancily smelled the wounded man, and dived under his arm as if he was the man's pet. "You're alive, boy." His fingers got tangled up in the fluffy scruff. He was anxiously watching Sergo's friends curling up around him and warming him up. The beam of the light like a razor cut through the darkness. The search party was slowly coming to the ravine. Two snowmobiles, one after another, were slowly moving from the village. Lena took her ski mask off (there was no need to have it on) and fixed her headlight. She slowed down a little bit, and suddenly saw a huge grey shadow. She backed to the side, raised her hand to signal the one coming from behind, and squeezed the brake lever with force. The light was dancing in the snow. Near the snowmobile on the bloody spot was sitting a lonely wolf. There was Andrew's gun a little bit farther. "Jela, where is he?" The motionless wolf shook her withers, got up and slowly walked along the ravine. The woman hurried to follow her and noticed a thin blood trace after the wolf. However, her thoughts were only about greatly missed Andrew. "Please hold on, we are coming." The second snowmobile was accompanying them, driving on a winding trail. The police officer was first to find the hut with the blood traces. He jumped off and took a gun. Slowly moving and lighting his way, he staggered back against the wall as he saw the inside. Lena ran out the wolf and dashed towards the hunting hut. There were three wolves meeting her and running away deep in forest. The woman looked inside and screamed pitifully. Andrew opened his eyes. "You're so loud." "Too loud to be in the forest," said he with effort and smiled. "Sorry, I messed up your present." He touched the sweater. Having realized that the danger had passed, Sergio got up and dusted himself off. He came very close, looked into Lana's eyes. Gently bypassing the woman, who had crouched down her husband, the beast dived into a snowbank that was next to the porch, and after making two leaps, he was next to the jailer. The bright dots of the lights of other members of the search group appeared in the distance. The wolves stretched out in a line and followed Sergo into the dark depths of the forest.